as airlines have announced dozens more flight cancellations across the UK. Holiday firm TUI says it's cancelling a quarter of its flights from Manchester next month, leaving the plans of around 37,000 passengers in disarray. The government's criticised the aviation industry over the disruption, which is expected to worsen during a surge this weekend, with 10,000 flights scheduled between Thursday and Sunday. Julia Bue-Said is the CEO at Advantage Travel Partnership, which is the UK's largest independent travel agent, and joins us now. Good evening, Julia.
Hi, good evening.
How fair is the government's criticism of your industry?
I think it's exceptionally unfair. I think for an industry that was forced to be shut down for 2 years and literally has had 10 weeks to rebuild itself, I think it's exceptionally unreasonable and unfair to finger point without considering solutions, and also considering that the industry has worked exceptionally hard under the most difficult situation to ensure that it can provide holidays. And I think ultimately we can't forget that there are millions of people who have travelled seamlessly, unfortunately, and there is no excuse. Unfortunately, the disruptions we're seeing are really a bottleneck in the system in the main as a result of the lack of staffing. And I have to say the government's really not helping with the image and the profile of the sector. Who would want to work for the travel industry right now with headlines that are coming out? So I think they're grossly unfair.
Who is at fault?
I just don't think you can point the finger. I think the issue really is a situation where we've seen the industry trying to, recover, rebuild, restart global operations overnight. It's 10 weeks since the government eased restrictions. We're still seeing restrictions in many other countries. There's been a surge in demand from when restrictions eased right across Easter, then half term. And the fundamental number of passengers that are wanting to travel is really what's creating this. And we're seeing bottlenecks right across the operational system, so from baggage handlers, staffing issues there, right across the ecosystem, from catering on planes, travel agents, in every aspect of the system, there are real bottlenecks and issues that have been created from switching an industry back on literally overnight.
You say finger pointing perhaps isn't helpful here, and yet it does seem that there's a sense for your industry that the finger of blame is being pointed at passengers wanting to travel. I wonder whether you think that perhaps warnings for your industry to prepare for a half-term rush have simply just been ignored.
Well, it's not necessarily been ignored by the industry. I think, first of all, our industry doesn't survive without customers, and clearly after not being able to provide holidays and travel for consumers, the one thing we all want to do is make sure that passengers can travel seamlessly. And as I said, in the main, millions of people are travelling without any problems. There are bottlenecks, and the bottlenecks are at certain airports. It's not at every airport right across the UK and across Europe. So they are confined. They are quite specific, and a lot of those industry players that are finding themselves in those difficult situations are doing all they can to make sure they can work through those issues and put those problems to bed.
Where does this leave travellers, holidaymakers, who've booked getaways and they're seeing those routes being severely disrupted?
It gets a bit complicated because it really does depend on how they booked and who they booked through. Clearly, every passenger has rights. Most of the cancellations that are happening before, way before departure. There is notification coming through. A very minimal number of flights are being cancelled on the day. And just to give you a practical example of where that scenario may happen. A lot of that does depend on stem from crew ratios. So, the number of hours that crew can work. So if you have a delay in a flight, the crew then are ready to go onto another flight, but they've now got over the number of hours they can work. And unfortunately, it creates that kind of chain right the way through where they're then not able to service that flight and ultimately leading to a flight being cancelled. They are very far and few between. The vast majority of passengers, TUI, for example, we know they've notified, they give notifications to their customers, I think now till the end of June, have been notified, so they will get advance warning. But there are passenger rights, there are some really clear rights for consumers, but it really does depend when the notification comes through, what they booked, have they booked a package, have they booked a flight only, and what is it the airline has done with that flight.
Unions are warning things are set to get worse before they get better. Gary Graham, the Deputy General Secretary of the Prospect Union, says that unions have been warning both the government and the travel industry about the knock-on effect of staff cuts during the pandemic. So what's ahead?
I think what we're seeing, we're coming out of this week where it's really busy. I mean, I was at Stansted Airport yesterday. I flew to Stansted, and actually there were no delays, no queue. There was a bit of a queue, but it was busy. It's half term, but actually I got through without any issues whatsoever, as did everyone that's travelling from different airports. So the bottlenecks are when you have a complete surge in demand, and we're seeing that this week. We saw that over Easter. Things will improve. They absolutely, will get better as staffing start to come back. A lot of the airlines have crew on training at the moment. They're starting to bring them back in. As we start to scale up and make sure that we build resilience in the process, things will improve. And clearly we're all hoping between now and the peak summer season, we're going to see a much better improvement of flights and less disruption for passengers.
So you disagree with the unions who say things will get worse before they get better?
I do disagree. I think we are now at that worst point. I think we're at a point now where we are seeing disruption, which is impacting confidence. It's impacting those passengers that have waited so long for to go away. It's impacting the whole system, and the people that are working, the people at the front line, are day in, day out having to deal with these issues, as are lots of travel agents right across the country. So these problems will come to a head. They are getting sorted, and between now and the next 4 or 5 weeks, we have a lot of time to make sure we can put staff in place in the right, at the right time, in the right place, to make sure passengers can enjoy their holidays.
OK, Julia, good to speak to you. Thank you. Julia Bue-Said, the CEO of Advantage Travel Partnerships, speaking to us on Times Radio tonight at 24 minutes past 10. You're listening to Raya El Salahi.